This is the newest Mazda CX-5. It's got a little bit of a facelift and it's still the best looking SUV at this size, regardless of price. I'll die on this hill. This car is also special to me because when I first started Downshift, it was one of my first videos that did well. And on top of that, it's a genuinely great car. And don't believe me? The original CX-5 review that I did, I liked the car so much that by the time my wife needed a new car, we ended up with this right here. And I just got rid of my 4Runner a couple months ago. And guess what I ended up in? So I've voted with my wallet twice, which should tell you a little bit about how I feel about this thing. And on top of that, you can bet when the CX-50 comes out with a plug-in hybrid, whenever that's available, you'll find that in my garage. And I'll tell you why. The CX-5s that my wife and I are pre-turbo day cars. And while it lacks some of the power that this new one has, the 2.5 under the hood is bulletproof. Both of our cars have over 100,000 on the clock. And all they ever need are oil changes, brakes, and tires. But enough about my cars. Let's talk about this 2022 CX-5. This 2022 CX-5 is the turbo, which means under the hood you have the 2.5 liter turbocharged inline 4-cylinder. We're familiar with this engine from reviews that we've done in the past on the CX-30 turbo, the Mazda 3 turbo, and basically what you need to know, if anything at all, when you put your right foot down, you're met with a tidal wave of torque. That 2.5 turbo makes 256 horsepower, which is up 6 when using premium fuel, and the torque figure is a very healthy 320 pound-feet. Interestingly enough though, I've driven back-to-back my naturally aspirated 2.5 and this turbocharged 2.5, and weirdly enough, my naturally aspirated 2.5 feels a little bit more responsive, it feels a little bit more agile, it almost feels lighter, and I think I know why. I think it has to do with throttle response. So at really low speeds, pulling away from something like a stop sign, you have immediate power and immediate linear rev band available to you, whereas in something like this turbocharged unit, you have a little more sense of occasion. You put your foot down, there's a little bit of time between when you put your foot down and when the turbo spools and the torque comes in. Now, that being said, once you get up past 2,500, 3,000 RPM, there is no comparison between the naturally aspirated engine in my car and the power that you get from the 2.5 turbo here. 320 pound-feet is a lot, and you're reminded of it, especially in the middle of your rev band and at higher speeds. The CX-5 for 2022 still uses the same 6-speed automatic transmission as it has for many years, and that's not necessarily a bad thing for reliability's sake. But you feel it a little more at the pump compared to something like an 8-speed. Turbo CX-5s like we have here are rated at 22 city and 27 highway. But in all honesty, if you just don't drive like a baboon, you'll be able to beat the EPA ratings for fuel economy, at least in my experience. However, you do have to then keep it out of sport mode. And actually, that's a good reminder. This is the first CX-5 that I've driven with my drive. My CX-5, my wife's, and all the other ones that I've tested have just a sport dial next to the transmission, which basically throws you down in your gear and hangs revs a little bit higher. And it does so in this as well. You get into a lower gear, the thinking is then that your turbo is constantly spooled, you have all of the power available to you. However, with this My Drive, which is new that I'm experiencing now for this 22, you have an off-road mode, which of course will adjust and tell the computer how it manages your torque split front to rear to help in things like rock crawling situations or in snow, gravel, sand, and things like that. The computer is doing a lot of that work underneath. This tester also has all-wheel drive. You can get front-wheel drive as base, but the all-wheel drive is terrific and definitely welcome here in Wisconsin for bad weather. The all-wheel drive system is a Hall-deck system, which means it's front drive biased, with the computer determining when to send power to the rear based on wheel speed and slip. This is important to note because the next-gen Mazda products are moving to a rear-wheel drive architecture with all-wheel drive as standard and the ability to option rear-wheel drive itself. This generally gives the car a more sporty, more expensive feel, which is definitely in line for what Mazda's going after. And speaking of sporty, we talked about the immense torque that this engine produces, the reasonably decent 6-speed transmission, and how that power gets sent to which wheels based on the all-wheel drive system. But we have to remember, this is a family CUV. 99 point whatever percent of the time, you're just using it to drive around town. And it's perfect for that too. The power delivery is great. It gives you a little bit of fizz, but the suspension, the ride, the cabin refinement does an incredible job of splitting that personality between comfort and luxury and refinement, and also that sporty, more fizzy aspect. I love this thing. I said it before, I'll say it again, I will die on this hill. This is the best looking SUV, CUV, of this size regardless of price, especially with Mazda's incredible soul red paint, accented with all of the black accents around the body, especially these new trim specific 19-inch gloss black painted wheels. They look fantastic. Now, this thing is kind of on its last legs. This 22 isn't a totally new generation. This is almost like a second facelift for this generation. Still same engine, still same transmission, and we've covered that. But what you get here is a lot of actually new stuff. You get new, more aggressive headlights. It's kind of BMW looking, or BMW wishes it looked like this still. You have a new grille with a new grille pattern, and you do have these interesting red inlays. I don't know if that's specific to the turbo, but you guys will let me know down in the comments. You've got a more aggressive, I guess, more elegant front bumper and fascia. Around the side, we talked about these wheels, these 19-inch gloss black. Accents really, really well with all of the black accents all the way across. This is the difference between Mazda and a lot of other of these CUVs. Your CR-V, your RAV4, you have this painted in gloss black rather than the rough, kind of rugged look that you would get in something like a Forester. Then of course you've got black accents like your black side mirrors, and the profile is stunning. You've got a nice long hood, and then the proportions are fantastic. The wheels fill out the wells incredibly, and you have the perfect amount of chrome right here. It's just on the lower half of your windows, but it looks great. Just a little bit of contrast to break up the red and the black. Then around back, again, you have an incredibly elegant and sculpted rear end, new design taillights, LEDs, of course, and then you've got your Mazda cladding on the back, your CX-5, all-wheel drive, Skyactiv G, turbo, all of that stuff. You've got a power liftgate and dual exhaust. It looks fantastic, but let's jump inside. Right, and then jumping inside, it's not a huge change, but that's not a bad thing at all. The styling is simple, it's elegant, it looks expensive. The center screen up here is big, it's new, it's better. You don't have wireless Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, but it is a much better system, and you have a better reverse camera, and all of this stuff is just a touch better than it has been in the past. And then looking down, you also get a couple things that you didn't get previously, like cooled seats. You have 3-level heated, 3-level cooled, and a heated steering wheel in here. The steering wheel itself is great. It's a good size, it's leather wrapped, it's got red stitching, and it's got all of the buttons that have a nice feedback to them, so I have all of the stuff that I need. In front of me, I've got a digital gauge cluster, which is great, and you still have things like your silver, I guess, surrounds for your things like your tachometer and your speedometer, so it still kind of has almost an analog feel, but with the customizability of having a digital cluster, which is really nice. And there's a lot to like about this cabin, but at the end of the day, it's not perfect. There are things like the sunroof, which isn't a pano roof. You do have a head-up display, but it doesn't have as much functionality as some of the other vehicles. And the rear seats, well, let's talk about the rear seats. Okay. So, again, I'm 6'1", I'm sitting behind myself here. My knees are touching the back of the front seat, and it's not terrible. I can keep my legs outside of the seat, which makes it a little bit more tolerable, but you do sacrifice a little bit of space back here in terms of knee room as compared to something like a Subaru Forester, a Toyota RAV4, or a Honda CR-V. But again, you kind of make these sacrifices for something like this. Beauty is pain, so you sacrifice a little bit of legroom to have the beautiful styling outside. And you do have things like red stitching back here and 3-level heated seats back here, so it's not like you're completely left out in the cold. It's just, it's a black interior, it's not huge back here, and for those reasons it makes me miss not having a pano roof even more. But then when we start to talk about the trunk, same kind of story. It's a little bit smaller than competitors, but again, beauty is pain, and that's what you're getting with the CX-5. But with that, let's get into the final thoughts. And that, I think, perfectly summarizes the CX-5. Where things like the CR-V, Forester, and RAV4 are more spacious and more practical, what you're getting here is something different. The CX-5 is genuinely quick and fun to drive. The CX-5 is neck-snappingly beautiful, and the interior design could fool some into thinking it was a Lexus or Acura. At the end of the day, these are the reasons that the CX-5 speaks to me and so many others. It delivers a more special feeling at a really reasonable price. This tester isn't even the top trim, but if you do go all the way up to the range-topping Turbo Signature, you're still under $40,000. Thanks for watching.